Jesus has this disconcerting habit of turning things upside down. The last shall be first, the humble will be exalted. He turns around all of our human expectations, the kind of things that in the world are important and that count for something. And Jesus says, no, it's just the opposite. So we think of this gospel passage as having to do with the idea of humility. Humility is something that people don't really take to very easily. It gives us kind of a creepy feeling, doesn't it? I mean, humility, backing away, I'm nothing, you know. No, that's not what it's all about. There are two ways of approaching the issue. The first is the man who went up to the temple to pray, and he was certainly right to bow down before God, to say, have mercy on me, I'm a sinner. He was being truthful. The other one was not being very truthful. He was proclaiming how great he was. We have examples of that in public all the time nowadays, don't we? But this man who went and abased himself before God was doing the right thing. We also do that in our liturgical ceremonies. When the ministers come in, everybody bows to the altar. To bow down is to say somebody or something is greater than I am. And that's the right thing to do. Not only for the ministers, but for everybody else. You know, when you come into church, please don't go quickly on one knee and make the sign of the cross, you know. No, just bow to the altar and sit down. That's the proper liturgical posture. The servants do it very well. So we do bow down before God. But in our human relations, humility has another meaning. The word humility comes from the same Latin root as human or humane. It's humus, which means soil. If you're a gardener, you know what humus is. You go out and buy some. It's the soil, the earth. God made human beings from the soil of the earth. We read on the first page of the Bible. So in human affairs, humility simply means the recognition of who we are to one another. Humility before God recognizes His almighty power and being. Humility in human relations has to do with very simple things. First of all, has to do with courtesy, kindness, mutual respect above all. The respect that restrains and keeps us from the selfishness that is kind of always hovering over us. Selfishness, me, I want what I want. Now, I want it, I want my profit. I want this win. Well, there are some things we're happy about wins, but in sports it's okay. In ordinary things in which we're supposed to do the right thing and get ahead, that's fine. But in our human relations, it means that we recognize the humanity of other people. That's the simple meaning of humility in that connection. And it's part of what our life as Christians is supposed to be all about, because as Christians we live in a community. Humility gives way or produces community. We are all together. We're in this all together, and we recognize one another, we respect one another, because we all have the same kind of origin and the same kind of goal. I'm not the center of the universe. Little babies are. A baby knows nothing except its own needs. I'm hungry, feed me. I'm wet, change me. But as grown-ups, we begin to realize we are not the center of the universe. We can't think only of ourselves, we have to think of others. So humility really means the capacity of being a member of a community, of looking at others and recognizing our common bond. It means unselfishness. Again, to take just a little example from sports, you know, Steph Curry, basketball player, he can make tons and tons of baskets, but at the correct moment, he will always not shoot himself, but he'll pass the ball to somebody else and let the other player make the basket. That's a sign of humility. Even in a well-paid athlete, it happens sometimes. It's an important thing for us to recognize in our relations with other people. And the goal, the end result of this is freedom. The freedom with which Christ has made us free. The freedom that God gives us as human beings to be ourselves in relations with other people. And that freedom, which we also call grace in our religious vocabulary, is not only the effort that we make, but it's the presence of God in our lives. God himself supporting us, moving us towards good relations with other people. A very simple thing. Our faith can always be reduced to very, very simple things. Jesus put it in the most succinct way we can imagine. What's the great commandment? Love God above all and your neighbor as yourself. That takes in everybody. God, my neighbor, and me. And it's such a simple thing, but it's so powerful and so important. In the face of the kind of selfishness and greed and self-promotion that we find in the world around us, in politics, in business, in education, in national and international relations. There is room for nations to be humble, to exercise humility towards one another. Of course, if you're a superpower, it's pretty difficult. But there are good examples in the world of nations that treat one another with respect and with dignity. And certainly we as individuals have to practice that ourselves. So in this Eucharist today, we give thanks to God for all of his gifts, and we ask for that gift of humility, which means our relations, the recognition of our powerful bond with other people. And so, as St. Paul says, if you do this, then you fulfill the law of Christ. And we are all in the same place. We are all worshiping and loving together. And that's what human life is all about. And it's what our life as Christians is all about as well.